All right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. Today, I'm honored to have Erik Huberman on. Erik is the founder and CEO of Hawke Media. And one of the things that has stuck out most to me about Erik as I've gotten to learn a little bit about his story is that he is always wanting to be a pioneer. He doesn't necessarily say, I would like to do it the same way others have done. He's like, well, I'm going to figure this thing out and I kind of want to figure it out my way. And so I'm excited for all of you to learn a little bit about his story and how he's had success doing that. So Erik, thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's kick it off with the idea of entrepreneurship, right? There are some people that were destined to be entrepreneurs. There are other people that just happen to fall into it. But when someone at the age of 6 decides to hawk a couple of their parents' collectibles, I'd say you're pretty much destined. So talk a little bit about the early years in your life and getting started in the entrepreneurial space.
Yeah, I still think it is nurture. I think the idea of being born to be an entrepreneur is a fallacy. And don't get me wrong, that nurture can come really subtly, but for me, it wasn't subtle. It was my dad telling me at a young age. Actually, I'd say at a younger age, like 4, 5, 6, he actually taught me two things. One, he taught me mental math using money. Like I have 2 dimes and a nickel. How much do I have? 25. Yeah. Like that was how we'd play that game in the car. Yeah. And then he also got me excited about the idea of saving money for the sake of getting a bigger dollar bill. So like if you save enough, you can have a 5, then you can get a 10, then you can get a 20. And so like that was me at a really young age. And so the reason you mentioned that story, I walked around my house collecting my parents' things that I decided they didn't need, to put them in a trash or in a pillowcase or trash bag, and walked door to door in my neighborhood selling things to our neighbors. And that was me trying to get more money to get to my next dollar bill. It wasn't because I was going to buy something. But then around 8, when I was 8 years old, I told my dad I wanted an electric guitar. And my dad's response was, yeah, cool, get a fucking job. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, when you're that age, unless someone makes you feel like that's not normal, you just assume your parents are talking to you, that's normal. So I was like, all right, I'll get a job. So I tried selling lemonade, didn't make money fast enough. So then I saw the Beanie Baby craze kick off and started buying and selling Beanie Babies and made a few $1,000 in a few months buying and selling Beanie Babies. And I remember the first big sale I had my first Beanie Baby I had, because I had a couple of them, because they were, if you remember back then. So that was when I was 8, that was like 94. They were people, like you'd get them as gifts for birthdays and stuff. And they were like beanbag animals. And so I had one that I'd had for a year that was like unraveling, that I'd kicked around my backyard and played basketball with. And I took it to a show and someone saw it and was like, I'll give you $450 for that right now. It's like, done. Yeah. Handed it to them, called my dad, and my dad, screwing with me, goes, okay, I'm sending a Brinks truck, an armored car. And I'm like, okay. And I took it seriously. I was like, okay. And I'm like standing there like, am I going to get robbed? Oh God, like holding on to the money, $450 in my pocket, thinking like, I'm definitely getting jumped for this. And again, I was 8. And so, yeah, that was the first, the outcome was, I thought I wanted to be a rock star and I was going to be a guitarist, and I had to buy my guitar and I played guitar, and I thought that was going to be my career till about 12 years old. So the next 4 years were me playing music, and, money was a means to that. And when I was 12, I saw Behind the Music with Sting, and he was ripped off for like $25 million by his manager. And I was watching it with my mom and asked her, how did that happen? And she's like, well, he didn't understand business. I was like, oh, so to be a musician, you have to understand business. So started getting more into it, and I decided I was going to be in music management or something. My dream was to go to the Berklee School of Music and study music management. And I also realized around that time that I just wasn't that good at playing guitar. I enjoy it. I still enjoy it. I've got one sitting right behind me there, but but I'm not that good. I can enjoy it. I can play, but I'm not going to be a professional. And so that was a cool realization in a lot of ways, because the idea of having a hobby that isn't your entire life calling was actually a really freeing thing for me. And then slowly throughout high school, I lost more and more interest in the music business and decided just to get into business. And that was the transition.
Absolutely. Now, something that I think is interesting is you had a very good, just like wherewithal within yourself of understanding, hey, I'm pretty darn smart, but I want to have a completely different social experience than what I had in high school. And so as you decide, hey, there's a lot of universities, but there's one that has a pretty good reputation for social events. And so you picked the University of Arizona.
Yeah. It was at the time, it was close enough, but far enough, meaning I wouldn't have a random drop in by my very loving Jewish parents, but I could get home if I needed to. It was a top 20 business school. And then I visited the August before my senior year of high school, and a family friend that was a junior took me to a pajama party, air quotes, which pajama party in college is a very different thing for a 17-year-old to experience, 16 to experience. And I was like, oh, I need to go here.
Yeah.
And I experienced what the reputation of Arizona I got to see as a going into my senior year of high school. And it's like, yep, I'm sold. Good, decent school. And this is what, after graduating with a class of 11, I was like, yeah, I need this social life. So, and I'm glad I did it. I have no regrets on that. Like, thankfully, I didn't need academia. That wasn't where I feel like I was missing. It was social. I grew up in a small town with a tiny school that taught me really well, set me up really well, but that social aspect was not there.
Yeah. So as you're in school, you're learning a lot of different things, getting more business acumen. And ultimately you end up deciding, you know what, I think the real estate route is going to be the route I want to go upon graduation. And you picked a interesting time to jump into that.
Yeah, I had that crystal ball and it told me everything was going to go to shit a week after I joined, but I still went for it. No, it was funny. I joined a firm called Sperry Van Ness as a commercial real estate agent. I keep forgetting if it was October or September of 2008, but it was literally a week before Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. So I could probably Google it. I think it was September. And it was a week to the day. And so I was there for a week, getting up to speed. The next week, the market's crashing. And I will say, no one really knew what that meant yet. Just like with COVID, when the market was crashing, like nobody knew if that this is a V-shaped recovery or a W or a Y or whatever other, random letter you want to throw at it. And everybody likes to come out and say grandiose statements, but no one had any idea how slow that recovery was going to be. And so I was in real estate for about a year, but I made $350 that year because I did a broker opinion of value for a repossession they were doing, and they wanted to know how much was it worth, and they threw me $350 cash, and that was it. I had $35 million in listings, so I never mind cold calling. I was a decent salesperson, so I hustled. I was the first one in the office, last one out. I literally got the key as the newest employee there, and I would open it in the morning and close it at night because it was almost like a chip on my shoulder that was like, I needed to prove to myself that I had the work ethic.
Yeah.
I partied for 4 years in college. I barely went to class with my full load fit. I love that a full load in college is 15 hours a week of class. Yeah, right. Supposedly they give you 2 hours of homework per hour of class, which I don't know who spends that amount of time, unless you're an engineer or a pre-med or something. As a business student, no, not the case. And so I had a lot of freedom in college, and I played a lot of video games and went to a lot of parties and had fun. And so when I got out, I was like, all right, so I had a total video game addiction, high school, college. I was like, this is when being a pro gamer was not cool, and you didn't talk about it. And I was ranked third in the world on one game and built a team that was number one in the world on another game. And you never talked about it. But when I graduated, I threw out all my video game stuff. I got rid of everything because I was like, I can't, this will distract me. So I went full in on working. And of course, learned the lesson that the whole working hard, working smart thing. I believe in doing both, work smart and then work as long as you I like working on long hours, but doing it in a smart way. But just working hard it doesn't necessarily do anything. I worked my ass off for a year and I made $350. And frankly, I don't really believe I have much to show for it. Everyone's going to go through those periods, but I happened to do it my first year out of college. I don't think that I learned that much there other than this sort of lesson. It was just I learned how to work. But it wasn't it's a good thing I put in those hours because I ended up making these connections. No, I literally started over after that and started a whole new company, completely different industry with people I knew from high school.
Yeah. Well, so I was going to say, so as you're doing the real estate, it's a tough time, just not necessarily working out. And you get presented by a friend's dad an idea or a problem. And he says, hey, there's a problem in this industry. You have the work ethic. Maybe we can come up with an idea. So talk about that first real entrepreneurial business in our adult year.
Yeah, it was pretty lucky. So I played music in high school and middle school, and I had a drummer in my band that was a friend of mine that I stayed in touch with, and I always looked out for him. And he had pursued music, and I knew nothing about his dad. And in Ojai, where I grew up, frankly, houses are not that expensive. So to live in a big house on a big property doesn't really mean much. It's the cost of a condo in LA to have a beautiful, massive house and all that. So I didn't know that my friend's dad was very successful. Didn't assume anything. And it turned out he was on the board of Men's Warehouse, had another company with Deepak Chopra, had co-founded pay-per-view, was just this list of craziness. He was the youngest attorney to argue before the Supreme Court of his time at 25. and won like a class action lawsuit that obviously pays very well for attorneys to do. So guy was successful. And he called me before I knew any of this and just said, hey, I knew him as my friend's dad. Yeah. I've admired your work ethic. You seem like you have a great, entrepreneurial drive. I want to figure out a way to help people like my son harness this entrepreneurial spirit as a musician and focus it so they can actually make money as musicians. And maybe we can create the middle class of musicians, because this binary, you're either famous or you're not, seems crazy.
Yeah.
That was the mission. This was in February 2009. So like I was still in real estate going heavy, but I was like, oh no, sorry, it was April. I was like, but shit, I don't think this is going very far. So let's look at something. Yeah. So I wrote a business plan, gave it to him, went over it with him. He liked it. And he said, I'll get back to you. And I went back to work, real estate. And then in July, he called me and said, hey, Erik, I've raised us $1 million. You're going to be in charge. You get 5% of the company. I'm going to have the CEO title, but you'll be chief. I think it was development officer was what he gave it to me, but you're going to run it and you're going to go learn all this. And at the time, I knew that it was pretty ridiculous that I owned 5% of the company, but he was offering me minimum wage and some equity. And I was like, that's better than what I have right now. So let's do it. And so I jumped in, and I do not like, I always hear people that are like, I got taken advantage of at a young age. Like I made that very aware of what I could ask for, what I could do, but I was also aware of my negotiating power and my positional power. Didn't have much. Right. So I was like, no, this is a good situation. I'm going to pay the bills because I learned how to live very lean. And if this works, I'll make some real money. So I spent 2 years with $1 million handed to a 22-year-old building out this company. And we got it to profitability, doing one-on-one business coaching for musicians, building an incredible board. This guy opened his network to me, funded it, again, paid me scraps, but paid me. Yeah. And I got 2 years in and realized this was never going to be that big of a business. It was profitable, but was never going to be my calling card, let alone the thing that would set me up to be able to send my kids to college or anything. It was going to make, maybe break 6 figures, but it was not going to be much more than that. And that's a big maybe. And taking the risk on running a business to maybe make $100,000 a year, not good. And I was far from that at this point. And so I actually hired someone to take my place that I'd met through my partner in it, and he took over and I left, and that's when I started working on the next company. So got it to a pretty good spot, but it was just kind of a revolving door of like the problem with having musicians. This is the biggest lesson there, was knowing who your customer is. Our customer was an independent artist with no money that wanted to be famous in a month, and most of them, I hate to say it, there is a small minority of musicians that actually have work ethic. Most don't. Most use the excuse of being a musician as a way to be lazy and shitty. The minority that are work honestly end up a lot of times making a career out of it. And I noticed that like the barrier for music isn't as hard as you'd think, because the vast majority of struggling musicians are just kind of lazy and unaccountable and don't show up, and they're not great or they're just not good at music. Like there's all these things, like good musicians that have real work ethic tend to get somewhere. There's still nuance to that, don't get me wrong, but I noticed that about the industry, which meant that like 5% of our clients at any given time actually wanted to make it happen and were willing to do what it takes.
Right. Now, something I want to highlight there, though, because it's just been a consistent theme from, essentially, 6 years old till 22 at this point. And that's that idea of work ethic, right? And so, that sounds like it was instilled in you at a young age of, hey, if you want this, you're going to work for it, and then you can afford to buy it. Now, how do you harness that today inside of a completely different set of circumstances that you're in now?
So this is where I'm thinking. So I'm the oldest. My dad's a successful guy. I was the one he was hard on. And don't say that with any kind of like actual, like I'm not in therapy for it. My dad he was a hard ass with me, and I love him. I had breakfast with him yesterday. He's great. But growing up, he was so worried. My dad made his success while I grew up. So I was born in, an apartment, but then ended up, he got very successful over time. Yeah. And he was so worried that I'd be the spoiled rich kid that he went far the other way. So hence telling an 8-year-old, oh, you want a guitar? Then get a fucking job. Like, right. He said some weird shit to me growing up that I'm glad he did, though, because even though, if you had observed that situation, you'd been like, Jesus, like, why do you have to be so harsh? But now I'm at a point where his voice is in the back of my head, where I'd tell him in real estate, like, yeah, I'm getting in the office at 6 a.m. every day. And his response would be, something wrong with 5 a.m.? It's like, so I always have that it's like, I have that sort of check in the back of my head that really is my dad's voice. I have to give it credit. That is, am I doing everything I should be doing? Like, can I do more? And it's not, and I do believe in healthy balance too. And I have a great, harmony, not balance. Like making sure you get, the breaks, making sure everything coincides, that you're enjoying it along the way too, I think is incredibly important. But also, if I'm sitting on the couch watching Netflix, unless I truly just need a break and I think there's like a breather there, which does happen, and I'm real with myself about it, I can get up and start working. And so, I still, to this day, it's well known across the company, I'm still we're almost 8 years into Hawke. We have 220 employees. I still by far work the hardest. Yep. And that's just an accepted thing, which, by the way, I don't fault anyone. I own the thing. I get it. But I'm not backing off. And it's not because it's also kind of like any other training, because I'm used to it now. It doesn't burn me out. Yeah. Today, my day today is from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. at least. We'll see if I actually end at 10. And then I'll have a pile of stuff that I won't get to that'll just stack up. And this week I have 7:30 to about 9, 10 p.m. booked every single day through Friday. And different things, by the way. I have lunch meetings and things. So it's not like this like grueling thing, but like, I like that. Because the weekend will hit. I'll go, actually Father's Day, I'll go celebrate with the family and enjoy the weekend. But I do believe in if you're there's just a lot of people waste a lot of time. And there's like a thing about efficiency and a thing about and I don't mean wasting time like Netflix. I mean this, taking a break is not wasting time if it's intentional. Yep. Going out and having fun. Like we were talking about before this, this weekend, I went on a 3-hour hike. I went and played golf for 5 hours, something I just got into. And that it's not like that moved the needle on my business, either one of them, but I did it intentionally because the fitness side of it, getting out and taking a break, I think is also as important, but do it intentionally. Because what ends up happening is when you're not intentional with your time, it just flies by. And then you realize shit, I just lost all that. So I even weekends pretty much schedule out my time, which includes Saturday night, I'm watching movies with the wife and hanging out. I'm not going to go do anything. And but I'm intentional about it versus just every night turning on 3 episodes of something. And unless you need that. And I really do mean that is sometimes getting a mental escape is great. I think that's great.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of what you said there. And I like how you, corrected yourself of the balance versus harmony, right? Whenever people in any capacity say, the work-life balance, and they're implying that it should be a same amount of time. It's well, that's just not realistic. There might be a few vocations, but not too many where you're going to be able to balance that.
Well, yeah. And aside from implying what that balance looks like, it's also the fact that it's your personal and professional life are at odds with each other. I think that's when you my favorite thing to do is to combine the two. Perfect example. Right now, I'm emailing back and forth with a rally racing school. And I'm I want to learn how to rally drive. It's a 2-day program. It sounds awesome. And I'm I bet I can get together a great group of entrepreneurs that we can do some work, brainstorm, do some cool stuff, and go rally racing. And so it started sparking. This happened literally this weekend. I was I could probably put 2 of these together a year, not just rally racing, but do adventure trips with entrepreneurs that a lot of them seem to have that in common with me, that we want to go experience cool shit. And just start throwing some events where 10 or 20 people come together and go do some cool stuff. And so I've been a part of some of these, but I'm I'm going to go do that. Because again, I want to go do these things, but if I can balance that with professional development too, then I have all the excuse in the world to go do it. Right. I can give myself that excuse. Absolutely. And it's a write-off at that point too, for all the entrepreneurs out there.
Facts. Oh, I love it. So we're business one. We've hired someone new to come in. So we're moving on to business number 2 at this point.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what idea stems there and how that gets kicked off.
Yeah. I usually don't go into this much detail about it, but basically my dad, having a midlife crisis, decided to start 3 fashion companies, t-shirt companies, and fund them. It was 2008, went completely belly up. Didn't go anywhere. He tried for 3 years. So by this was now 2010, I think was when I did that. Yeah. So 2000, late 2010. Yeah, that's what it was. I'm sitting there. My dad calls me and goes, I've got 3,000 t-shirts that I got to get rid of. Can you just fucking go sell these at a swap meet or something? No, it was early 2010. So I go pick them up while I'm doing the Fame Wizard thing and put them in my apartment. So I've got thousands of t-shirts sitting around my apartment. And then I basically told my friends, my dad's go to swap meet. So I started looking into selling t-shirts. It was 50 cents a shirt. So I'm the hell am I going to go to a swap meet? And I'm great. I'm gonna make $1,500 if I sell out, which will never, this is not worth my time. I'm not going to do that. Even though I'm not making a lot of money, I'll go make a couple $100 in a weekend. Like that's not where I'm a little above that. I can make more money than that at this point. And so I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So they just sat in my bedroom. Then I started telling friends, hey, just go grab one, pay me $10. I'm like, all right. So they started taking t-shirts and paying me $10 cash and sold a few. And then I'm sitting there on the couch with a friend and I'm like, I hate shopping. And like, I wonder if we could just like send people these t-shirts on like a monthly basis and pick the ones they might like and charge like $9 a month. It was literally just like hanging out on the couch with my next door neighbor. And he goes, oh, well, I ran a t-shirt business. So I know a lot of the economics. So we could probably do it. And this is what the cost to make a t-shirt. So like if it scales, I'm like, well, let's do it. Called a buddy from college, said, hey, we want to build a one-page lander and then send them to PayPal to subscribe. We did it, launched it. And the biggest part of this whole story was, so we put up a little one-page thing, but a buddy of mine that I'm still in touch with told me like the best way to get into press is to write what they'd want to write about, like make the headline for them. Yeah. And he's like, for example, if you ever want to be in TechCrunch at this time, this was 2010, just tell them you raised money and they'll write about you. Like, all right. So I emailed tips@techcrunch.com and said, hey, we just raised $100,000 for swag of the month. And 15 minutes later, a guy named Josh Constein that just left, but was there for a decade. He was the editor at large, I think there, calls me immediately and goes, hey, tell us about it. I made up the whole thing, by the way, we didn't raise any money. And he published it within 15 minutes and it drove 600 subscribers that night from the TechCrunch article. And so then we did the same thing with other press and we got a bunch of press, got this thing going, and then rented a small office, started manufacturing t-shirts and ran this thing for about a year and change. And it got to the point where like we had to pay our rent. My partner and I were living together at this point in a cheaper apartment than we had with another roommate. We had one employee. We could only afford to pay the three of us our office rent and our rent. And like when I say pay us, we were all making minimum wage. And that's all we could afford, a minimum wage on top of rent, I should say. So we paid ourselves living in LA. So we covered all that and did this for a year. And it got to the point where we had scale, but we weren't making enough to hire a team because we just didn't have the economies of scale yet. So we were working 18 to 20 hour days, barely sleeping, trying to keep up. And we're like, we got to the point where we were all yelling at each other. It was miserable. And we're like, we got to either sell this, raise money, or shut it down. Like, this is unsustainable. Yeah. I met with one VC named Howard Morgan, who ran First Round Capital. If you don't know him, he's a legend in the VC space. I just happened to meet him at a breakfast. I pitched him on it and he said he loved the idea, but he had just invested in a company called fab.com, which ended up being a $500 million loss. Yeah. So he couldn't because it was too close because they did fashion too, which was respectable. Always, I've seen him since. He's always been a great guy. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of things out there to teach you about VC. So like I pitched the one VC. I thought that was it. We can't raise money now. So we have to either sell or shut this thing down. And literally serendipity, I'd met a woman that ran a holding company in e-commerce that called me, like this was a Friday, called me on Tuesday while I'm trying to figure out what to do and goes, hey, you want to sell your company? It's like, sure. She's like, how much do you want? I'm like, I don't like doing the math. I'm like, well, I'm in this much debt. So that number times 2 because I own 50%. So I'm like, this number. And she goes, great, come pick up a check. She knew me well. So she's like, come pick up a check. You can transfer everything over. Let's go. It's like, and at that time, I'm like, holy shit. Like, it felt like so much money. I just 4 years of debt, getting out all clear, selling a company. This is awesome. Now looking back, I'm like, fuck, I would have done that deal on the other side. That was so dumb. Like, wow. So I did it. We got out, and that was a really interesting point in my career because I had no job, no company, and I was flat broke because I had taken enough to pay off my debt. So I did that, paid off my debt, and then went, oh shit, like how am I paying rent next month? So I scrambled for a few weeks, which felt like an eternity. This, I would say, is the second most stressful point in my life because I had no idea. My lease was up in my current apartment. I had no idea where I was going to live. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I started applying for jobs and I got offered within 2-3 weeks. I got offered the head of biz dev at Live Nation, head of e-commerce at Warner Music, and to go consult at a small incubator in Santa Monica that had just launched this company called Dollar Shave Club and was looking for some marketing people. And I, against my parents' wishes, I took the consulting job. And this is true because I didn't want to commute to Burbank or Hollywood from Santa Monica, and working by the beach and startups sounded better. And all three pretty much paid the same. So I was like, so I can commute an hour each way every day or go work on 2nd Street in Santa Monica right off the beach and work in these startups, and they're still going to pay me well. Is the longevity there? Maybe not, but I was at that point 25. I was like, I'm going to try it out.
Yeah.
Took the job, they ended up having me consult for Dollar Shave. They had about 12 e-com companies, and I was the guy that had sold a subscription e-com company. So I had some credibility, went and consulted. They put me on a vitamin company that was failing, and I helped them pivot it to be an activewear brand that frankly skyrocketed, then made an insane amount of operational mistakes they wouldn't let me be a part of because they said I was the marketing guy. And so I ended up helping them. They screwed everything up. I helped them right the ship, and then I helped them sell it. And so I spent about a year there and sold it to Bowie Total Fitness. And then that company asked me to come work for them. I said no. That became my first consulting client, wherein I realized I could make more money consulting 3 days a week than I made full-time working.
Yes.
And that was the beginning of me consulting, which led into where we are now.
Yes. So as we talk about that and the, getting a little bit of pushback, we'll say pushback from your parents of, hey, maybe that's not the job that we would take if it were you. How do you balance that, with having the close people in your life giving you feedback that is not bad feedback, right? But not always just listening to, those trusted people when maybe you've got something else that you'd rather be doing.
Yeah, I learned how to articulate this because of an organization called YPO that I joined, the Young Presidents Organization. So when they do a monthly forum, where the idea is you come in, you're very open about where you are personally, professionally, in your family life, and they call it about the barbell, like the crazy good and the crazy bad. Don't talk about your fucking life story, like just what's really good and really bad.
Yeah.
And then you basically pick usually a couple people each time to talk about something that they really need to talk through. And the idea is to not give advice, but give shared stories, because you're never going to have enough context to give someone advice off a 30-minute presentation on what's going on in their life. So it's the same thing with when you're getting advice from very smart people around you. I've had it happen many, many times. They don't have all the context I have.
Right.
And so, my parents know what Warner Music is. They know what Live Nation is. They know what making six figures is. Oh, and that was a big part, is all three of them offered me six figures after I had been making minimum wage for years. So I was like, I'm rich either way. This is great. So I was used to living off $3,000 a month all in, and now I'm making $9,000. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be a good time. So so I heard their advice, but I knew where they were, their context. I knew where they're coming from. Of course, that's more secure. But I was like, but I'm 25. I don't need to be secure. I'm not worried about if worst. Like my thought was, there's more opportunity in this, and I'm going to enjoy it more, and I'm going to learn more. And learning in my 20s was always a priority. If I'm in my 20s, it was like everything I do, I have plenty of time to make money. I have no responsibility right now. God forbid I go bankrupt. Like that is where I had a bottom threshold. Like most people, I could move home. I didn't want to, I never did, but like I had that safety net just like most people do. Not everybody has it, but most people do. And so I was like, I'm just going to go for it. Cause like, if I have to go home with my tail between the legs, like fucking 25, who cares? Like I was very confident, but I also wasn't, I don't know how to explain it. I didn't fear that conversation as much. I didn't ever want to have it, but I wasn't like, if that really happens and I really tried and I fail, that's okay. And so I thought with science, much more in line with what I was passionate about and building these companies, I was going to learn from some pretty key guys that were offering me good money, and I was going to still have the freedom to go build stuff. And so I made that decision. Plus, I didn't know this at the time, but the association with Dollar Shave Club ended up way better than the association with Warner or Live Nation, which are good companies. And frankly, that commute was a big part. I actually am, again, the whole wasting time thing.
Yeah.
I've always believed like a 2-hour commute, adding 20% to your day by sitting in the car. It's why my company's all remote now. Right. It's like, yeah, this is great. Even if that's, again, that free time where you go get some, check out a little bit, whatever that is, driving is inefficient in every way. So it's just, I try to schedule calls when I have drives, but still, it's just not an efficient use of time. So, I did believe that. And I did believe that I'd get an extra couple hours either and I actually put in the time. So like, instead of 2 hours on the road, I would be at the office till it was well dark out and working late. And like, because I was no rush to get home. It was 5 minutes away. So that was a big part of it. And so again, when my parents were giving that context, I knew they wanted me to be safe.
Yep.
And that's a big part of where parents' advice. And same thing happened with Hawke. I've had incredibly bad advice from incredibly brilliant people for my company.
Right. Absolutely. No, I love that. That's a great point. So yes, we're starting the consulting media side of things now. And so you have yourself and a partner, right?
Yeah.
And so how did that partnership come? Was that a partner from the previous business, or was this a completely new partner?
So yeah, he was the guy that ran the music company.
Okay.
He's who came in and took over. And I called him, this has been 3 years now. And he had helped me we always stayed in touch. I still owned my 5% of the music company. And he helped me. Literally, we have a picture of him helping build the furniture at the Swag of the Month office. And we also, at Ellie, he actually came over and worked with me for a month on the activewear brand, and then was like, I'm going to keep going with the music company. Yeah. So I called him like, hey, you've done it for 3 years. We were right. It's never going to be a big business. I think that we have more opportunity here. So I was about 6 months into consulting, making 30 grand a month at 26 years old. I was going to start a tea company, but I was quickly realizing that there was something here helping these companies. And so I'm like, I need help. I need a few people to come in and help build some infrastructure. I need you to come in and help like manage the clients, because you're good at talking to people, you know your stuff. And so he took a really low salary with some upside based on what people paid us for strategy, and came in. And within 2 weeks, he was managing our team of 7 people and letting me go out and figure out how to grow it. And so he came to me really early and said, hey, instead of a rev share on my silo, can you give me a profit share? Oh no, can you give me a rev share smaller, but across everything, so that I'm incentivized to like work with everyone? And I was like, yeah, but it's going to be profit, because if you're going to do that, I need to know that you care about the cost too. He's like, okay. So I gave him a profit share. And then 6 months in, he came to me and he's like, stop distributing profit, like keep the money in the business, just give me equity, which I was super against for a long time. Not him specifically, just in general.
Right. Yep.
I brought up a little old school on the equity thing. And now, again, another thing I wasn't able to articulate back then, but can a lot better now, which is, I don't know that I'm going to sell this. So I don't want to be stuck with random people that aren't here for the long haul, because I might be. I'm not, this isn't a 5-year window for me. In fact, we're already at almost 8. So yeah, I knew that from the beginning. And so anyways, gave him equity at that point, converted to equity. And then a year after that, a year and a half into business, he came to me, and long story short, basically was like, I think I've done more than my equity dictates. And I was like, I agree. And we basically 2.5x what he had and became, full on partners. And that was, what is that, 6 years ago?
Yeah. So I think what's interesting there that I'd like to highlight is, you had the mind to hire someone that would complement you in regards to, they did the things that you maybe either didn't want to do or weren't going to be as good at doing as they would be. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a big miss for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it was, it's way more fun to be able to focus on the shit you're good at generally. Yeah. Most people like doing the things they're good at. And I was really good at business development and meeting people and growing. And I was good at marketing strategy, but I didn't like managing clients, like getting on the phone with clients every week. Cause we used to talk about it. Like, it's better now because we have a lot of systems in place. At the time, it was like fucking dodging punches all the time. Like, well, what about this? Well, that's it. You're constantly triaging. And like, after doing that for 6 months plus, it gets old. And so I was looking for people to take things off my plate so I could double down on things, again, I wanted to do that I was good at. And I'm good at talking to clients. I shouldn't say that. It was just like, I could tell that wasn't going to be sustainable for me. I wasn't enjoying it. And so found people that enjoyed it, and then again, continued to build infrastructure around it and make that a better experience. But that was really where it came from. And then again, I started Hawke without any intention of building something big, but always left the door open. Meaning, like, I called it Hawke Media before it was Hawke Media, because I didn't want to call my own little consulting Huberman Consulting, because in case I wanted it to be something and I didn't want to always get the phone call. So called it Hawke Media. I put a logo, I made it look bigger than it was, which got me some clients. It was literally a website, but then I got a guy couldn't afford to pay me marketing. So he asked if I'd take equity for marketing. I said, sure, but he wrote for Forbes. I'm like, so you have to feature me in Forbes. Yeah. This is right when Wolf of Wall Street came out, and Forbes had a little bit of a rejuvenation of like being like, because it's all about his article in Forbes that was so big, and that set him up. So I got this article about why you should outsource your marketing to Hawke Media in Forbes because of my buddy. And that credibility, it didn't get a lot of like traffic, because that's not how it works, but showing that to people, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, we got to work with this guy. And that's really, that combined with my background at science and Swag of the Month and having a couple exits, I basically became the LA poster child of e-commerce, and everybody wanted to work with me. And the good news was I was available. So my competitors, none of them had the experience I had. So it became very easy to win business early on. And that's really what kicked it off. And again, brought in my partner, who I trusted explicitly, that I never worried about, that we were on the same page. We knew how to work together. We enjoyed working together. And to this day, it's been a good partnership.
Yeah. Now, inside of, your guys' consulting and handling with clients, you do it differently, right? Most firms say, hey, you got to sign these really long contracts and here's all the things. And you guys say, you know what? Hey, as long as we're adding value, you're going to keep coming back to us. So we don't feel like we need to put on a set of handcuffs on this business relationship. So talk a little bit about that, because once again, it's unique in your industry.
Yeah, it just came from being on the other side. It was like, you're asking me to sign a year contract and I've never worked with you. Like, I'm not marrying the person before I date them. Like, this is
Right.
ridiculous. Like, why would I do that? And if you're confident in like, set my expectations right. And if you're confident in what you're saying, as long as you set my expectations right, we shouldn't have an issue.
Yeah.
Unless it really doesn't work. I'm like, if the only reasons you lose clients like that is like, it doesn't work and they need to move on. You didn't set expectations right and they're caught off guard, or their business is failing for other reasons. Either way, I don't want to be stuck in a fucking contract.
Yeah.
Like, I need to go. So I always felt that way. And so I went the other way. I understand why the agencies want long contracts, but I always thought it was crazy that this is one of the only industries that the businesses aren't client centric. Like, I'm going to build my business for how the clients want it to work. And that's how we started. And don't get me wrong, we added small protections in there for the irrational ones, like a 30-day out. Like, yeah, you got to give us a heads up. You can't just irrationally fire us on a Monday anymore, because we had dealt with that, where it'd be, entrepreneurs are emotional creatures and they could have a bad day. Their, girlfriend yelled at them, et cetera. And all of a sudden they're taking it on us and saying, fuck this. Like, we didn't, that frankly has saved us, especially in COVID when everyone was panicking and running for the hills, right? Take a breath, hold on, let's see what happens. We'll take your notice, but we're going to see this through the next month. And that saved so many of our clients, because their average revenue doubled for our clients in Q2 of last year, as people were trying to run for the hills.
Absolutely.
So
no, that's awesome. I love it. And you guys have worked with really large companies, right? I mean, you've worked with, Bally's, you already referenced, Red Bull, Verizon, right? A lot of well-known. So what was, I know you said, hey, having that article in Forbes gave us a lot of credibility, but what was maybe the couple or a few partnerships that when you got those, you really saw maybe the dominoes start to fall and connections there?
It's honestly been incremental always. It's never been like this one crux point, because we've grown a lot every year, and every year has a different moment. It's not even moments. It's I'd say the path to growth is a staircase, not a curve. But it literally shoots up and flatlines for a little, and shoots up and flatlines for a little, is what we've experienced. And it's breaking through those barriers. And those barriers, though, aren't necessarily like this one thing and then everything's good. Like, that's not how it works. It's usually like you start optimizing a certain piece that balances out with another piece really well, and then all of a sudden you get a little growth out of that. And that's what we've seen over time. And like the big brands we've worked with, we still work with a lot of big brands, are usually through relationships, some random relationship with someone or something that someone saw. We announced today, we are launching our Gen Z agency called Hawke-Z with two of the biggest TikTok stars. And our launch partner with that is Crocs. Crocs, who I've known the team at for a long time. Their head of digital sold me his agency. They're great people, but we've never had a reason to explore working together until now, because we have this new angle. So things like that and again, like Hawke-Z could end up being this huge, massive success that ends up being like, I'll look back 2 years from now and be like, that's what did it.
Yeah.
Or it could be what I hope so, but I expect it to be a great piece of business. It's not going to be the thing. It's going to be one of the things that gets us to where we want to go. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Now, there's a couple of stories that I want to highlight that I found very entertaining, and anyone that's an entrepreneur has been in this moment. And it was one day you had some payroll to take care of, and the amount that we had on hand was not going to take care of the payroll. I think you said, hey, I had like $15,000 and we had payroll coming up.
I don't think we had that. We've never missed payroll. I'm trying to remember the story.
Okay. Maybe I misread that one.
Yeah, I think that was a misread, because we've gotten tight, but we've never actually gotten to south. Like even when COVID hit, we had lost 25% of our revenue. All this stuff happened. We have a line of credit that we pulled all the cash down, and we never ended up having to use it. So we've always stayed profitable, not on a monthly basis. We've had losses in months, but we've always stayed above water with our cash.
Okay. Maybe
that being said, it's come close. And there is a story of a friend that built bootstrapped $100 million business and got short. He was building out a new office, didn't keep track of cash flow very well, because they were all scrappy bootstrap company. And all of a sudden payroll came up and he realized that he wasn't going to make it and had to borrow $250,000 from his mom to make payroll, because they couldn't get a line of credit because they didn't have one. That was a great lesson for me. Like, get a line of credit as soon as possible. Because even now, I got to be honest, I won't name the bank because I'm still doing business with them and hope to fix this. But our bank came to us with a new line of credit. We'll do about probably 35 to 40 million dollars in net revenue this year, probably 250 million in gross revenue. And their offer for our line of credit was 500 grand. And I got the offer and I was like, got to be honest, guys, what the fuck do you want me to do with this?
Right.
There's just no point in me taking this. It's just a headache. This doesn't help me in any situation.
Right.
So my payroll is what, 3 times that? So yeah, it's a month.
Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, appreciate it.
So again, you got to work through with the bank when you don't need it, because then you can have those conversations. Because when you need it, the answer is no.
Exactly right. Well, another one that I thought was interesting was you had taken a trip to Monaco and you had realized while you were there that, hey, 90% of sales is running through me.
Yep.
Good thing, but a problem nonetheless. So talk a little bit about like bringing your ego down, because I think for some people that almost like validates them, right? They say, well, gosh, I'm the one that drives this. So talk a little bit about, your position there and what you kind of envisioned for the business at that point.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from, but I got to be honest, like my success, I feel more lucky than good. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm very confident in the work I put in. I'm very confident in my level of intelligence, but I don't think that I'm that special. I really don't. And so the ego hasn't really been a problem for me, because I don't think that when I hear people tell me that they're successful because they worked hard, I'm like, we all have 24 hours in a day. Like, go fuck yourself. Like, that's, hate to keep swearing, but it's like, that bugs me, because it's like, there are so many hardworking people that never have the opportunity because of either, the access to opportunity or from the education or whatever it is. Hard work is just an equalizer. We all need to work hard to be successful generally. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't even an ego thing. It was a scalability thing. It was like, and to highlight the second part of that story, we went to Monaco. We have friends that live there and stayed with them for the Monaco Grand Prix. And I'm sitting at my buddy, story for another day, but I have a buddy that won the lottery and crazy fucking win. It's nuts. But he met us out there and we're hanging out with them at this hotel, looking over the bay at these multi-$100-million yachts. And I was like, I never want one, but I'd like the option to have one. Like the way I'm working right now, that will never be an opportunity ever. There's no way I will work my way to ever being able to consider that. And again, it's not because it's an actual goal. I don't really care. Like, thankfully I grew up with a successful family that I was exposed to some of these things that I'm like, renting it maybe once every decade could be cool for a week, but like, I don't want to have all this shit. But the optionality is what's important. And the reason so that really drove me to go, well, so how do I make could my business be $1 billion business or a $2 billion? Well, not the way I'm working. Literally, I'm sitting there thinking about this. Like, not the way I'm working now. So I got to scale where are we limited? Well, I'm still selling all this. So I have to figure out how to finally pass that off. And so I came back and ripped the Band-Aid, and I was gone for 2 weeks, I think, for that trip, which at the time was hard to do. Like, it was a lot harder to take 2 weeks off than it is now. We have a pretty good infrastructure now. So for those 2 weeks, I had already passed, I can't sell while I'm out there. I think I did actually try to do a couple deals, but generally I wasn't selling out there. And I came back and said, I'm not getting back into it. All my leads we had a small sales team. I was like, you guys take the leads now. And that was end of May. June, July, we did dip. And it was like, come on, guys. And then August kind of started coming back. And, we ended up, that was thankfully an obvious move at this point, but at the time, a hard one to do because their close rate was nowhere close to mine. So we were going to lose business because I was passing it off.
Yes. And I think I was going to highlight that if you didn't. So I'm glad you did. And it didn't just progress on like it had been Erik running it, right? Yeah, it took a dip. And I had heard once from a mentor of mine, and it was delegate things. Just manage your expectations that the person that takes over for what you're delegating to start with isn't going to do it at 100% your capacity. If they can do it at 70 to 80% though, and they have the desire to grow into the 100%, it'll probably be a good delegation.
Yeah, totally. And by the way, 5 people doing 80% of you is better than you doing 100. It doesn't take long to replace yourself. There's a little more cost in there. So you have to watch your margins because you're having to now pay a couple people and they're not going to produce as much. So that happens. But thankfully, we nailed our business model that we haven't really had to shift that much to make that work.
Absolutely. So inside of your business today, I'm sure you've got a board or, a group of folks that, you're constantly bouncing ideas off of and are giving you feedback and direction. How did that come to be? And what has been the importance of having that board in your relationship?
We don't have one.
No.
No. I have a great group of entrepreneurs all around me because that's frankly most of my friends at this point are the people like sort of my peers. And I am a pretty open guy. So when I have issues, depends on the issue. I have a lot of different people to call, but I've never put together a board of directors or advisors. We have no outside investments. We don't have to have a board of directors. And frankly, the benefit of like it's, people say they love having it to keep them accountable. I don't really have an issue of being accountable.
Yeah.
Like I want this more than anyone. Like I want this to be huge. I want this to be a multinational, like my drive. I don't need an outside source to get drive. Thankfully, I've got enough of a chip on my shoulders. So that's not an issue for me.
I love it. So kind of last thing that I would ask you about today then is just this idea. It was an idea presented to me years back, and it's just kind of stuck with me. And I love asking successful folks their opinion on it. It's this idea of blissful dissatisfaction. And so that is a lot of people, when they hit certain goals, they kind of plateau because they say, you know what, I hit the goal. Like if I can just maintain this, I'm happy now. Mm-hmm. Then there's the whole opposite side where it's like, every time I hit a goal, I'm so quickly on to the next one that I've never taken a minute to, appreciate the things that I have accomplished. And I think you have an interesting balance of that. So I'd love to hear just your thought behind that idea.
Oh no, I'm much more of the latter. I do take a minute.
Yeah.
Like when I got Forbes under 30 was like, I'd say the first major achievement as a professional. It felt like an achievement.
Yeah.
Because I thought I had not gotten it. And I was 29. So it was like last year. And it was like, I saw my friends all announce that they got it and I didn't get any note. So I was like, I guess I missed. And then I went to read the list to see if I knew anyone else and crossed my name. Literally was walking down the sidewalk I took a break and went to go get coffee. I remember exactly where I was and like jumped up in the air because I realized I won. Got my coffee, came back, told the team, we all high-fived, and then I went back to work.
Yep.
That's the extent of celebration. We got our new big office that's now gone. We threw a party. That was less about me celebrating, more about I like an opportunity to throw a party. So like, it's funny because I do intentionally try to celebrate the wins, but what's gotten us here and part that I'm not trying to really fight away from is what's next. Yeah. And it doesn't, I'm not miserable. I'm not like lacking any enjoyment in what I do. So I don't feel a need to like take a beat and make sure that I'm enjoying it because I am. But I also like that, and I even highlight it with our team, with our executive team, like we're very focused on the problems. We're very focused on where we're going to improve because that is what's making us successful. Yeah. That doesn't mean that I'm not. And I said this, we had our quarterly offsite last week. And I was like, just to be clear, we're exceeding our goals. We're crushing it. Like we're making good money. Our teams are happy. Like there's a lot of great shit going on. Now it's getting like, good. Everyone good? High five. Okay, cool. Now let's spend the next 2 days talking about all the bad shit. Like it's like that. And that is where that is sort of what the balance looks like for me. It's like a quick celebration. I get it, but we are far from where I want to be. And I don't want to say admire, but I do respect the people that, hit that point that they're satisfied and they're good. Like that's a great time to exit. I've turned down many exits this year and I frankly have stopped having the conversation because I realized that's not what I'm going for. Like no one's going to pay me more money for my company than I can derive from it myself. That's the whole point. So, and as long as I'm not bored and I'm still enjoying it and I don't want to just ride off into the sunset, I'm probably going to do this for a long time.
I love it. Erik, as I knew it would be, your story's fascinating and I appreciate you just giving a rundown of everything. And once again, congratulations on all the success you've already had, but all the success you're going to have in what we'll say 3 years. We're going to do this again. I can't wait to hear the next 3 years of stories after that, brother.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.